Dear Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for allowing us to get together tonight. We ask that you be with each of us as we do work that the town would like us to do and people of the town would like us to do. We ask that you be with each member of our area, watch over them, those that are sick, those that are currently in service. Please be with all servicemen, police, fire, and so forth. Please watch over our country, and thank you for everything that you do for us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I can cover this in comments. It don't have to be.
If there are no changes, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move to public comments and presentations. Are there any public comments?
Anyone sign up?
No one signed up?
No.
Okay. Move to the consent agenda. There's nothing that anyone wants to pull from the consent agenda to move to the regular agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor? And the motion carries. We go to items of business. Item number 1, discuss approved critical intersection analysis results. Bjorn Hanson, Union County Senior Planner. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is a follow-up from back in the spring. We presented an overview of the process. We've completed the analysis and are presenting the recommendations to you, which includes a location in Fairview. So, I'll go back to full screen. Okay, so the process started in January with the kickoff and process confirmation. Wow, it's actually turning into subtitles. It's pretty cool. So starting in January, we had the kickoff and process confirmation, and in the month of September, next month, is when we hope to go to the Board of Commissioners with adoption. In the meantime, we went through a lot of data collection, prioritization, public outreach, and then the analysis and confirmation of the recommended 15 locations. And 15 is not a magic number, it's just what we started with when we started the process 7 years ago, and 15 seems like a nice number, so we continue to limit ourselves to that number in subsequent cycles. So in terms of public outreach, we did a fantastic job. I honestly can't remember if I presented to you before or after the public comment period, but we did extremely well as a county. We had almost 3,000 people, which is, again, huge. It was more than triple what we had done 4 years ago.
Any idea how many of those were in Fairview?
I can pull that up. It was several dozen, roughly correlated with population, so you were less than others, such as Monroe or Indian Trail. But I will note that the overall results skewed older, whiter, more urban, and female compared to the county as a whole. But they still represented the whole county. And we did have representation from all 14 municipalities. In terms of what we should emphasize, made a mistake in how I asked the question, because I asked what should be, how high should we emphasize congestion? And people said, yeah, it should be the #1 priority. And then I asked, well, how should we prioritize safety? And people said, yeah, that should be the #1 priority. So I should have put them in the same question where you had to choose one over the other. But people wanted both safety and congestion to be prioritized. And that was something we already emphasized, so that was good to hear. Truck traffic consideration, but it shouldn't be overwhelming. Same with prioritizing growth prioritizing projects in growing areas. That's an emphasis as well, but it shouldn't be the overwhelming one. Same with bicycle pedestrian considerations. It should be a component of the overall assessment of an intersection, but the only reason we do an intersection shouldn't just be because of bicycle and pedestrian traffic. So in terms of our scoring matrix, we tweaked it from previous cycles to include 2 additional considerations. One is constructability, which means are there utilities, buildings, environmental features, any other complications that are going to make it hard to build that project versus you're in the middle of a farm field and yes, people's property matters, but moving some farmland versus a building is a very different request. And then secondly, the multimodal considerations. Is there a improvement or a connection to the sidewalk or other form of pedestrian network in the area that would be connected or otherwise improved by having the intersection built to include bicycle and pedestrian considerations? That mainly benefited the municipal areas, but not always. And the public input mattered. It did identify additional locations, and many of them were good ones that made it into the recommended list. These aren't in any kind of an order, but the top ones were ones that made it into the top 15. The ones at the bottom were evaluated and didn't make it into the top 15. So you can see 74 and 601, there's actually 2 intersections of 74 and 601. This would be the one by Hilltop, so on the east side of Monroe by the hospital. It's actually one of the top 3 truck choke points in the entire region, which is surprising to hear, but it is. It's the intersection of 2 major US routes with a lot of truck traffic. DOT actually acknowledged the analysis through this process and are going to submit it as one of their candidate projects in the prioritization cycle that's actually underway right now, which is great to hear, which means that we don't have to come up with local money to improve it. And we didn't want to because we said, this is the intersection of 2 US routes. Why should the city of Monroe and or Union County be responsible for improving a statewide tier facility? Ray Road to Marvin School, this one was identified. This is close to Blakeney on the western end of the county. Old Monroe and Hayes / Faircroft. This is a couple offset intersections in Indian Trail. And then Cuthbertson and Lawson Borough Hall, which is access to a large subdivision off of Cuthbertson Road with some intersections that honestly it's just very difficult for the residents to make left turns out of. And also there's some pedestrian gaps that allow them to walk to the Cuthbertson school cluster in that area. And then in this part of the county, you have Unionville Break and Unionville Indian Trail. This one was identified as, it didn't have a huge crash rate, and it also didn't get a huge number of residents' comments, but the comments that were received were overwhelmingly for safety. And Unionville attended the meetings, including, I believe, a fire chief, and talked about the issues at those intersections are offset and the need to do something. And we didn't know what that something was, which is okay. But that intersection made it in as a result of just local awareness of the issues and the need to identify something. It had a pretty high crash rate, but because volumes are relatively low, the absolute number of crashes weren't that high. But that intersection made it in because of public input. Some intersections that we considered but didn't make it in, Weddington Road and Waxhaw Highway, that's actually on the west side of Monroe, where 84 and 75 come together. They actually lose their NC route designation at MLK, so we call them Weddington Road and Waxhaw Highway. It was close, but didn't make it in. 601 and Sykes Mill, that's a bad intersection, no doubt about it, but it just didn't score high enough. And then Morgan Mill and New Salem, similar. Not to say that it doesn't have issues, but it didn't make it into the top 15. If people were to look at intersections and say, well, why didn't you consider X intersection or Y intersection? A lot of them were already pretty much built out. And so they have turn lanes, they have intersections. Really the issue is the road needs to be multi-lane. There's just too many cars on that road. So us trying to improve it in some way, really the improvement is adding capacity in terms of more through lanes. And so these intersections were evaluated and not included because of those reasons. And then some of them, because of new flexibility in Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, the CARPOs, prioritization process now allows expensive intersections to be considered. And 3 of them are ones that we would look to submit. In fact, we have a way forward with all 3 of these. One is 74 and 601 by Hilltop. DOT is going to submit that for the prioritization process. Rocky River and Old Charlotte Highway, that's where the railroad tracks cross at an angle. We actually have submitted that with the city of Monroe as a flyover bridge project in the railroad category. So this is actually being considered a railroad project because it's going to close one of the crossings or eliminate one of the crossings because now there'll be a bridge over, and it would have a connection off to the side similar to MLK at 75 on the west side of Monroe.
Which is the crossover? Is it Rocky River or is it?
Old Charlotte Highway.
It'll cross over?
Yes, sir. That carries more traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a project. And then the third one is Mill Grove and Idlewild and Indian Trail Fairview and Secret Shortcut. It's a mouthful. The 2 intersections right there by
The bridge restaurant.
yeah, the Bridge Restaurant, just last night, Mayor Presley's restaurant. And what had happened in that instance was Idlewild Road, there's actually multiple sections of it that are in different stages of funding by the DOT. Right near the interchange at 485, that's funded, that's gonna happen. The next section down to Stevens Mill, that was going to be funded, but the design involved so much widening that Stallings said, we would rather kill this project than have it proceed. So that project went away. But then the section from Stevens Mill down to the bridge still existed. And we recognized it doesn't make much sense. Why would you multi-lane the section of road, just have it to go back to 2 lanes? So we said, let's rescope this project to just those intersections. Indian Trail, Henry Bridge, and Stallings all agreed, and we've actually submitted it as a rescoping to just those intersections. So some of these major ones, we have figured out a way to try and get them funded without the locals having to pay for it. So that's really positive. Now, top 15, they do have scores by them, but this is not our indication of priority. The county's position has always been any of these that between the DOT and the municipalities they want to partner with the county on becomes our priority. So if everyone except Unionville, for example, said, yeah, we don't want to submit for an application for funding this cycle, but Unionville said they did, then all of a sudden this would be our priority to try and get that funded, if that makes sense. So I'm really glad that I think we have 8 of the 14 municipalities across the county have an intersection in them. So that's really good for partnership opportunities. All but 2 are actually inside a municipality. And there are a range of projects. Some of them are very big, and we're going to try and get them funded through the state's funding process. Some of them are smaller, and we're going to go through the normal CARTPO and NCDOT safety processes. And I'm going to pull up a map to show these. So the next steps in the process, here we are in August. We've confirmed the top 15. We just had our monthly stakeholder meeting last week. We said, yep, this 15 is good. We're now presenting to all the municipalities. Monroe's actually, their staff are presenting to their city council tonight. I think they have 3 locations inside Monroe, and maybe 4 locations in Monroe. And presenting here to Union or to Fairview, and we'll be presenting to the other municipalities through the second week of September. And then we're going to take those recommendations to the county commissioners at their second meeting in September, ask them to endorse the report with the 15 locations. Now, what we're working on at the same time is highlighting the fact that just like what Fairview went through with the county 3 years ago, we want to take a subset of these intersections and submit them for a planning grant to CARTPO to actually develop the designs and the cost estimates for them. So that way we know what we want to apply for. Right now, we can only say at these locations, we want to do something, but we